What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
To understand the reasons for the lack of success of the 955 in our market, it is enough to remember what happened on it about 10 to 12 years ago. By the time the 955 arrived in Russia, it was no longer a novelty. In the States, Hyundai's largest crossover had been sold under the name Veracruz since 2006. The model was built on the same platform as the Santa Fe and stretched the wheelbase by 105 mm, from 2700 to 2805 to accommodate the third row of seats. The car reached us in the beginning of 2009, having found itself in a very hot market, where competitors were advancing on all fronts. For those 6 million rubles that it cost at the start of sales, it was possible to buy cars more interesting at least by appearance. For example, Mazda CX-9 or Honda Pilot. And the diesel version, which appeared a few months later, cost 8 million rubles, which meant competition not only with Nissan, Pathfinder and Mitsubishi Pajero but also with Volvo XC90 and with Volkswagen Touareg against the background of these veterans of the market. The newcomer with a rather faceless appearance did not seem to be a favorable purchase, and the 2011 update did not affect the exterior in any way. But today on 955 can pay attention to those for whom the appearance of a family 7-seat crossover does not seem to be a determining factor in the purchase, especially taking into account that prices for these cars are very attractive. Is it difficult to find a good one? If we talk about the body, not so much. Of course, this does not mean that the paintwork here is durable, and galvanization is eternal. American origin, multiplied by Korean pedigree, gives not the highest corrosion resistance of damaged areas, and chips appear easily. But overall, age and decent care leave these crossovers in the game. Defects are usually touched up in time, and corrosion doesn't kick in. Most often, flaws can be found in typical places: on the hood, the leading edge of the roof, and the front pillars. The fifth door is also a classic problem. Here rust appeared already 3 to 5 years after purchase, so it is worth looking under the molding. Besides, it is better to examine both hinges of luggage door fastening and hinges of side doors, especially driver's door, which sags during active operation. And going higher, you can check the mounting points of moldings. They are also a place of water leakage into the cabin and a source of corrosion, which can support the hatch, especially with clogged drainage. The whole lower contour of the car, as it should be for a crossover, is covered with plastic, but sometimes there are problems under it too. And if on the doors it is easy to see them, the sills are better to inspect on an elevator to check the seam, especially behind the front wheels. Vast cavities of arches also should be inspected, and also to pay close attention to the bottom. Off-roading does not benefit this car at all. Why it is so, we will find out a little later, and now we will make sure that there is no old dirt in the cavities of the bottom, between the gas tank and the body, as well as on the subframes. The comparative rarity of the model throws up difficulties in terms of buying body parts. Non-original replacements are not available for everything, and prices for the original are moderate, but still decent. For example, a new hood will cost more than 20,000 rubles, and front wings, 8 to 10,000 rubles apiece. Windshield is also not cheap, more than 25,000 for the original, and a decent analog will cost 15,000. But the main panel of the front bumper in the original version can be bought for 10,000 or even less, although small grills. And moldings will run up to 3 more prices. A halogen headlight will cost a little less than 20,000, but an optional xenon headlight will cost twice as much. At the same time, the chances of finding something on the dismantling in Russia are minimal. No wonder that owners are looking for options to order parts directly from Korea, as well as from foreign dealerships. As we already know, the 955 platform is inherited from Santa Fe, so the suspension schemes are the same, in front of the large crossover. Has the usual passenger McPherson, and the rear multi-lever. However, compatibility on details should not be expected. It is possible to pick up only separate details. However, it is not a problem. The assortment of substitutes is not very large, but sufficient, and prices are moderate even for many original parts. For example, the front lower arm costs 7,000 for the original and from 4,000 for the analog. The standard replaceable ball bearing for it can be bought for 2,500 in a firm package or from 600 rubles in a non-original. Stabilizer struts are the few things that fit from the Santa Fe, and they cost kopecks. Rear levers will require 3,000 to 7,000 each, but even here analogs can be bought twice cheaper or generally do without replacing the silent blocks, which are also offered in the range. Hub bearings are considered a weak point of 955, which at someone serve their 120 to 150,000 kilometers, and at someone fly every 50,000. They hit the budget noticeably. The original hub in assembly, that front, that back, costs from 6,000, and though the prices for non-originals start from 3,000, the decent variant will still cost 5,000. Well, and the main potential risk of large investments, rear shock absorbers with function of automatic leveling of a body under load. Of course, there are no substitutes here, and prices for the original, as luck would have it, from 30 to 50,000 per unit and higher. Besides, it is better to change them together with springs, and it is another 5 tons each Hyundai 955 2008 to 12 brakes in 955, of course, a disc brakes all around, and ventilated discs are used on both axles. Mechanisms are usual, with a floating bracket, but in front 2-piston. In general, the manufacturers care about brakes taking into account the weight is traceable. Expendables cost quite usual money. The front disc with a diameter of 321 mm will cost 7,000 for the original and from 3,000 for the analog, and the rear ones will be about 1,000 rubles cheaper. Steering control here is also simple, with a hydraulic booster, and does not cause complaints about the resource. Repair, however, also does not shock, if not to look at the price of a new original rack, exceeding 70,000. The restored one will cost 15 to 20,000, and Mando, 25 to 27, which is very good. GUR pump from the same Mando will also allow to save twice, 7,000 against 12 to 14,000 for the original. All-wheel drive on 955 is made on a typical scheme with a clutch of connection of a rear axle. True, problems usually wait not here, but at the point of conjugation of the gearbox and transfer case, or rather, a single-stage angular gearbox. The essence of the problems is known from other models, for example, Kia Sportage. This is damage to the splines in the connection between the transfer case shaft and the differential. The splines gradually wear out and eventually come off. This is why it is recommended to avoid vehicles that have been operated off-road. Slipping, jerking, and sudden starts accelerate wear and increase the risk of failure. In this case, it is almost impossible to predict the remaining life. The only reliable option, disassembly and inspection, but to remove the box and transfer case to look at the splines, an unacceptable luxury. So it remains only to check the functionality of the four-wheel drive and the absence of obvious backlashes and leaks. The 955 had no choice of gearbox, and the only option was a 6-speed automatic TF80SC, TF81SC from Aisin, which the Japanese supplied to a lot of manufacturers around the world. This box is quite good and reliable, and its resource under condition of oil replacement at least once in 50 to 60,000 kilometers can exceed 200 to 250,000 kilometers. However, in relation to 955 there are several obstacles. Firstly, on a heavy car with a powerful engine the box is not easy, and secondly, the mileage of most cars has already exceeded the mark of 200,000 kilometers. Besides, this automatic transmission does not like aggressive driving, actively wearing out the torque converter locking linings, overheating and consuming resource many times faster. So, you should not rely on the general reliability of the unit and take the seller's word for it, telling about slow and quiet driving. The engine range of the big crossover Hyundai was minimally sufficient. Under the hood there was either a gasoline or diesel V6. And both motors are familiar to us. For example, on the Kia Mojave, and the petrol engine was found on Kia Opirus, the gasoline motor. Of the Lambda family with the Index G6DA has a volume of 3.8 litres, and the diesel D6EA, 3 litre. True, there was no question of adaptation for Russia, so if the diesel is within 239 to 250 horsepower, the gasoline motor produces inconvenient 260 horsepower. However, at one time gasoline cars were no less popular than diesel, so now the secondary market shows parity in the number of proposals. Of the 100 proposals available on Avito at the time of writing, gasoline was exactly half. But too high power is not the only disadvantage of the gasoline motor. The main censure is unpredictable resource of cylinder piston group. Sometimes problems with piston group lead to oil burning at runs up to 200,000 kilometers. If to add to it expensive and not immortal chain timing, and also oil leaks and other trifles, diesel will cease to seem so terrible. Of course, here too the timing is also driven by a chain, but it is quite reliable, and the cast iron block promises a consistently long life. Of course, fuel equipment and supercharger will require thorough diagnostics, but if they are in good working order, the chances for a long happy life with a diesel are higher. Based on the above-mentioned facts, we can conclude that the external ingenuousness of the 955 is quite supported by technology. Except for the breaking off all-wheel drive and know-how like body height adjustment, everything here is cheap and easy to maintain. Against the background of a somewhat unpredictable gasoline motor, diesel looks more preferable. And for 1-2 million, it is quite possible to find a car from the first-second owner with a mileage up to 150,000 kilometers and accident-free history, approximately like this. Well, if it seems to you that investments in transport tax will still be less than in a diesel engine, you can look for a gasoline car with minimal mileage. Once in a while there are such promising options. And if Autoteca will confirm the mileage and accident-free history, and diagnostics will not reveal any problems, then good maintenance of the motor and gearbox will be a guarantee of a good resource. In conclusion, the Hyundai 955 presents a compelling option for those seeking a reliable vehicle without unnecessary frills, especially at a price point of 1.2 million rubles. Its low maintenance costs further enhance its appeal, making it a practical choice for budget-conscious buyers. While it may lack some of the bells and whistles found in more expensive models, the 955 offers solid performance and comfort, proving that you can indeed find value in simplicity. Ultimately, if you're looking for a dependable SUV that won't break the bank in upkeep, the Hyundai 955 is worth considering.